What about you, Mr. Pittman?
I'll do the Data and Research Committee also. Have a access to quite a bit of data on the public defender side.
Okay. Mr. Carter? You need a little bit more time. We can go to Ms. Burgess.
I'll volunteer for the Youth Voices Committee.
Okay. Ms. Robinson.
Youth Voices Committee.
Okay. Dr. Foster.
Can I do the data and research?
Yes. Dr. Peterson.
Youth Voices.
Okay. Ms. Ricard Chambers.
Youth Voices.
Okay. Secretary Summers.
100% Youth Voices.
Yay. Ms. Mathis.
Youth Voices.
Okay. Ms. Anderson.
Youth Voices.
Okay. Ms. Hankton, which committee would you like to be on?
Youth Voices.
Okay, great. What do we think? So first, let's do this. The people that you guys have recommended for those communities, the committees, make sure you email them to Dr. Nugatu with what information would you like, their name and their email address?
Yes, that's good.
Okay, so the two people that you recommend for each committee, email Dr. Nugatu their name and their email address so we can reach out to them to let them know that they have been recommended for these committees.
Ms. Dominique, I would like to be on the Youth Voices Committee as well.
I am sorry, I forgot to come back to you. Thank you, Mr. Carter, that's great. I like to see that everybody's so involved in the youth. And so let's talk about what the charge for each committee should be. And let's start with the Youth Voices Committee first. So, as you know, we're here to create resources for institutions, schools, organizations that work closely with children who are impacted by incarceration. And I hope I'm not embarrassing you, Trinaya. I've known Trinaya for about 3 years. I went to school with her mom. And when I first met Trinaya, she was extremely shy. So her joining DBI has helped her to open up and to be able to feel safe in spaces like this where she's not embarrassed to talk about her father's incarceration. And so we want to be able to create more spaces like that throughout the state of Louisiana. Mm-hmm. So what do we think the charge for the Youth Voices Committee should be?
I don't think we got all the attention. Not yet.
Oh, okay, somebody. So fitting into the completion of the report, the Youth Voices Committee will be able to find youth in different parts of the state who are going to weigh in on how mass incarceration impacts their lives, how it affects their schools and academic studies, how it also affects them in the juvenile justice world, or even if being a child of an incarcerated parent presents them with more opportunities to enter into the criminal justice system in their eyes. So that's kind of what that committee will fit into, or how it will fit into the report. Like you'll be charged of creating focus groups in different cities with a different variety of kids to be able to work closely with the data and the research committee. Mr. Carter, what do you think?
I think that's going to be awesome. That sounds like a great start, you know. I believe that, I just think it's awesome. I really don't have anything to say, but I'm just excited to do this work and actually get some feedback from the kids. I think that they're truths and their experiences are definitely valuable. Are going to help us get to where we need to do to help them.
Okay, so what do you think? Is there anything that you feel like I may have left off that the committee should work on? What about you, Ms. Ricard Chambers?
One of the questions that I thought about is whether or not we only want to limit the participation of the youth to those who are currently minors and have parents who are incarcerated or were incarcerated, or do we also want to open it up to individuals who, although they may not be under the age of 18, if they are just a little bit older but experienced having a parent incarcerated, do we want to sort of open it up to that age group as well, or do we want to just cap it at 18 and under?
I mean, I think 25 is also considered a youth as well. I think once a parent enters the prison system, you're impacted. Not the length of time doesn't justify you as a child of an incarcerated parent. It's like once you're taken away from your family, then your family becomes impacted as well. That's what I think. But Ivy, what do you think? What is, as a formerly incarcerated person, what do you think?
Hello, everyone. One of the things that I didn't announce in my introduction is that I'm a formerly incarcerated person.
I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. It's fine. I'm transparent. I went to prison at 17. I served 26 years as a juvenile. That's why I'm so happy to be on this board and share my experience. And I believe I have a lot to bring to the table. I believe when engaging with youth, someone like me would allow them to open up more and be able to share their personal feelings, what they're feeling. And I have a lot to offer as far as ways to navigate through society and still be impacted, but how to move beyond those barriers. Again, I'm honored to be a part of this board. I came home at 43. I'm the first female in the state of Louisiana to be released under the Miller-Montgomery juvenile ruling through the parole board. So yeah, I've been home 2 years. Thank God.
Yay. And Ivy has been killing it. Every criminal justice event there is, she's been there. Ms. Hayton, what age groups would you like to see in the Youth Voices Committee?
Starting at 14.
Okay, you think 14 to maybe 25? What do you think?
Yes.
Okay. Does everybody agree starting with age 14 to 25? I think that's a good. Okay.
I agree. And excuse me, I like to also, say that when they were doing a study on the juveniles, they said that the brain doesn't fully mature until you're up to the age of 25. So I think 25 is a good cap.
I think so too, Ivy. I definitely agree with that.
I have one other question. Are we limited to the children, or are we allowing kids that's gone through the criminal justice system, possible juvenile incarceration, to be a part of the Youth Voice that redeem themselves in some way and start it over?
Oh, that's a good question, Ms. Burgess, and I think I'm open to that as well. Like, I think formerly incarcerated youth should definitely be involved in that. Yeah, I think they should be involved in that as well. Okay. That's a really good question.
Thank you.
Shania said that's a good idea. Yep. This is
I have a question, Ms. Dominique. How about current incarcerated youth? I know when I was working at Green Hill School in Washington State, I got a chance to work with youth who were locked up, their parents were locked up and grandparents were locked up. And I think that trying to break that cycle and maybe getting their input, because what they're going through currently might be valuable. Is it okay if we reach out to the youth that are inside the juvenile system already currently?
Where is Mr. Pittman? Mr. Pittman, could you help us with that?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
I wanted to know if we could reach out to youth that are currently serving a sentence in our local juvenile halls, our local current youth parish institutions.
And we've got OJJ on the call. I'm sorry.
We do have
I
OJJ.
don't know if Bill.
Right.
Secretary
I'm sorry.
Summers, yes, yes.
I'm sorry. I meant Secretary Summers. I'm sorry.
I'm all for that. And just to dovetail back into what Leslie was talking about earlier, is I think that that up to 25 and the adolescent brain and to have those kids to be able to mentor the other ones is perfect. I mean, when we have kids that have gone through and their parents were incarcerated for whatever reason, and to be able to have some kids that be able to mentor some younger ones would be a perfect way of them being able to tell them how to navigate the system. And I am all for this group being able to empower some kids that we have in our secure care sites or some non-secure care sites that could be a part of this group. There's no better way of them being able to express what's going on in their lives and being able to say that, I came from a home that my mom or my dad or my grandma or whomever was incarcerated. So I think we're all for this 100%.
I think this is going to be good.
Awesome. I think that's really going to be my contribution to this committee.
That was a really great question, Mr. Carter. That was good. Okay. Do we have any more input for the Youth Voices Committee?
I do. I think we touched on this last week about answering. I don't know how hard it would be to get in with all the different systems with the schools, because again, I just feel like that's not tackled with some of the organizations that they have. I just don't think that they're meeting the need. That's why we have this council. So I would suggest, and I'll start to see if we can get with these disciplinarians or whoever they are in the schools to seek out these kids.
Maybe that's a question Dr. Peterson can help us answer.
And I apologize, Ms. Robinson, I had to take a call. Can you just give me the last part of that?
With part of this committee, the Youth Voices Committee, I was suggesting that we get with some of these schools. I know the schools aren't public anymore, they're private entities, and I know we run into all kind of roadblocks with trying to, get this information with children of incarcerated parents. So I think we have a vast majority of our kids, especially in New Orleans, and I'm sure throughout the state of Louisiana, that we can reach to to help these kids. So how hard would it be to get in the schools?
Yeah, I think, so just to say, I think, one, we have public schools, private, and our charters are still also public schools. And in New Orleans specifically, as we were talking about what we're doing with this committee or what we want to see, actually began to kind of change who I was thinking about bringing to the committee for that very reason of this actually be a place to think about how do we get school-based people involved to be able to get access to those students. So I can definitely assist with that. Definitely, and make a note to myself specifically in New Orleans for you.
Okay.
I think that'd be great.
And if I can add, through our organization, we have a really good partnership forming with the school board. And one of our working groups is to access children that are in the system that are on the verge of dropping out of school. And so we're about to start something for them during the summer. So if I can help kind of connect through the East Baton Rouge school system as well with that newly formed partnership with the new superintendent.
And I think I'll just add too, in terms of in conjunction with Mr. Carter's piece, you also have the Travis Hill School, which is in New Orleans. So that's also a place where we can think about how do we get them involved as well to bring those voices to the table too.
Yeah, I'll definitely reach out to them. I actually just became a member of their board, so I'm definitely going to reach out to them.
And I'll reach out to Kip because I also know the disciplinarian over there.
Okay, and so with the people that we're going to, or the different connections that we're going to try to connect about actually getting more kids involved, let's send those names and whatever the outcome is to Dr. Nagatu, so that she can help us to form these committees and so they can kind of meet and get that started. Do we have any more input for the Youth Voices Committee? Let's move on to the Caregivers Committee. What do we think the charge for the Caregivers Committee should be? What do we want to achieve? I can tell you the one thing that my dad, while I was growing up, his biggest thing was when he went to jail, he felt like his position in my life had been taken away, especially after my mother got married. So he kind of felt like someone else is there to be my daughter's father, and I'm not her biggest fan. As a caregiver, my mother worked hard to ensure that my dad and I maintained the one thing my dad. Do y'all hear an echo, or is it just me? I don't know. But the one thing that she wanted to ensure was that we had a great communication, and so he would not feel like his place had been replaced, or he had been replaced. I'm sorry. So I want to make sure that we see if we can work with Natalie, who's absent today, and to see if we can actually get people who are currently incarcerated to be on the committee as well. I mean, it'd be wonderful if they could get my dad to join, but maybe that's just too much like Ray.
I'll work with Natalie. I'll have a conversation with her to find out how that can be done logistically. The constraints are going to probably be relative to organizing it around a time that they can participate. So moving forward, if I think that's a great idea, but I know that we need to also consider what timeframes those individuals will be able to have access to internet. And I do know that during COVID, DOC opened up more opportunities, electronic opportunities, to have those individuals communicate with their family members. I know that OJJ was able to do some Zoom calls with parents. I'm not sure that DOC opened up that type of infrastructure on the adult side, but we'll see if we can, figure out how that could logistically be worked out.
Okay. Okay, so what do we think the Caregivers Committee should be responsible for? For one, they should also talk about the impact that the importance of the communication and the parent's role, the caregiver's role throughout the incarcerated person's sentence. Specifically for this report, talking about one of the things they can talk about is how costly it is to just care for a person when their loved one is incarcerated, and how it could also be mentally draining. I remember sometimes that my mother was pretty stressed out by some of my actions, and I know there are a lot of mothers in our organization that come to us with a lot of stress about just day-to-day living and just dealing with the outlash that the child gives to the caregiver because they are growing up with an incarcerated parent. So what do you guys think the charge of this specific committee should be?
I'd like to weigh in on that. I think we need to be able to make sure that they're supported.
Right.
I mean, especially when it comes to a grandparent.
Yes.
That might be raising an adolescent. I've seen that way too many times in my career that than having grandparents raising adolescents due to the fact that either the parent is incarcerated or has some some drug dependencies and whatnot. And I always thought that we needed to do a better job across the board in juvenile justice is to be able to make sure that the caregiver is supported. And I don't know if we've ever done a very good job of doing that. And I know it kind of blurs the role a little bit of what we do, but I think it's very important. And I think we need to do a better job collectively. And I'm not sure how to do that. Never have been, but I just do believe it's on my heart to be able to share, is I just don't think that juvenile justice has ever done a very good job of being able to support those caregivers. So
That's really good, and I agree, Secretary Summers. Bree, go ahead, Dr. Wilson.
No, I was just going to add that I think in organizing at the community level, many times there's a gap in knowledge, right, about what the resources that exist are available, right? So one of the things maybe as an idea is that mapping the resources that are available to these families. You have DCFS, you have, LDH. I mean, so that could be the first step, just mapping and making sure we empower all the caregivers to understand the
what
resources.
their options are.
Second thing that I would add that in the spirit of what Secretary Summers said in terms of grandparents raising grandchildren, right? There's the kinship care dollars that are available through DCFS. This could be a wonderful opportunity based on what comes out of the caregivers conversation to sit down with Secretary Walters and talk about a carve out just for these parents in some way, to support them and enroll them through a fast track or something, right?
Okay.
But I think it's unlimited in terms of just mapping the resources that are available right now.
That's a great idea. I think the report should definitely have access to resources for caregivers and parents. I agree. In the chat box, you see Bree put that the Caregivers Committee should discuss lived experiences, communications, visitation, and how expensive the calls are. It's so stressful that it put a strain on a parent to maintain the child relationship because they don't want to visit the parent in prison anymore. We should also find ways to see how caregivers can be supported. Yeah. She said that she didn't visit her father until they had the free bus rides twice a year. I agree. My grandparents, they took me and my other cousins to visit my dad. It was twice a year on the free bus. Yep. And sometimes
Ms. Jones, I help to staff the grandparents raising grandchildren. So I will talk to some of the individuals we have on that commission and refer them to this one, since I don't think anyone has signed up for the Caregivers Committee.
Hi, this is Jawanda. I'll be on that committee. Can you hear me?
Yes, I recorded it. Thank you, Ms. Harris.
Is there anyone else with some input on what the Caregivers Committee should be or should do? And I think we all can agree with Secretary Summers that we ultimately want to achieve, we want to make sure that the caregivers are supported. So that's our ultimate goal with that committee, is to find ways to better support the caregivers. And that's with communication, visitation, and maintaining relationships between the incarcerated parent and the child. So I guess I like those three things. And don't forget to send your 2 recommendations for that committee to Dr. Nagatu, since we don't have many people in our group that join. We'll definitely need your recommendations. All right, let's go over the last committee, which is the Data and Research Committee. So I want to throw this idea out here to you all and kind of get some feedback on it. There is a grant through Tulane University that Daughters Beyond Incarceration is working on, and it is a research grant. And the grant is an opportunity for us to do exactly what the report wants us to do. So Daughters Beyond Incarceration wants to apply. If we're awarded the grant, we would like to partner with the council to actually get the research done, and that can be a way for the council to get the report that we need. What do you guys think about that? Dr. Wilson, have you ever seen that done before in a committee?
I think on the surface, it seems fine. I just, we have Attorney Chambers on the line, but we may
She
just
was
want
my
to
next person to go to.
Yeah, we may just want to just have one conversation offline to make sure there's no conflict of interest. That once we clear that hurdle, I think we're good.
Okay.
I agree. Yeah.
Okay. And so ultimately, the Data and Research Committee, we want to be able to provide public data on the percentage of children throughout the state of Louisiana that are impacted by mass incarceration. And once you have that data, you'll be able to describe those children and identify those children into their schools and provide resources for them upon enrollment into school. And so overall, I ultimately feel like if my teachers knew automatically that I had a parent incarcerated, that I could have been treated with mental health services upon enrollment into school. You know how you have automatically, everybody has to go to physical education, right? So we should also start implementing some mental health education classes. Just like it's mandatory for us to have physical education, it should be mandatory for us to have mental health education, and we should have that upon enrollment into schools. That's kind of the agenda that DBI has been pushing for such a long time, because nobody knows the impact or the trauma that you are stuck with the first time you see your incarcerated loved one outside of prison bars and they're shackled and chained. They don't think about how that gets imprinted and stamped on your brain. What else do we think that this committee should do? I think.
If I may add to your suggestion, Dominique, what I do know is that a lot of schools provide information to parents if they want their children to participate in those therapeutic type model conversations or courses, I guess, in schools. What we ought to consider also is, I think, just making sure that if there are schools who are offering these types of programs to children, that we're able to identify entities or agencies or counselors who are well aware of the issues related to children or the impact of children who have incarcerated parents. Maybe we can discuss exploring how to integrate that concept into some of the models that already exists in some of these schools. And again, a lot of this stuff is voluntary. Parents have to agree and sign off to allow their children to be a part of them. Just in case we have some issues trying to get it mandated.
I agree. I think one of the things that our parents struggled with, and some of the girls, was that the counselors at the schools they weren't trauma informed. And so they really didn't know how to handle children who were impacted by incarceration. I mean, the children in our program, they require transparency. I mean, before we could even sit down and meet with them, we had to open up to them. And I think it's the same for them with counselors. They want to be able to connect with somebody who has experienced some of the same things or has had experience dealing with children who have experienced parental incarceration.
And so we have a lot of our schools are focused on social emotional learning and kind of all encompassing with that. And we actually at the department have a student well-being work group with about 9 systems who are implementing different social emotional learning curriculums and just kind of learning more and diving into that. So I think when this part of the committee wants to think about being able to talk to schools who are doing some of the work and figuring out what things they're doing, what things are working, and how can they embed this in there, I can get you all connected with at least those 9 systems that are doing that across the state to be able to have some people to talk to.
And so maybe that's one of the things that we do. Once we get our committees ironed out and we have co-chairs and chairs selected, maybe we have some organizations or entities come and present so we can list them in our report as an opportunity for them to be able to support the children that we serve. What was I going to say? I think that it's important for us to also work with organizations that focus not only on SEL, but restorative healing as well.
And I think it would be a good idea for the data research committee. I know it may be a stretch to get some of those numbers, but I would love to see the numbers of kids, the truancy numbers of those individuals that are not attending school, that dropped out of school, that may have been a result of, their parents were incarcerated or something else. I think that would be interesting find to see how many children are part of that high truancy number as well.
And so let's talk about that, Ms. Burgess. What measures should the committee take to obtain that data? Should we do focus groups and surveys, or just focus groups, or just base it on the area that we're working with and how they best respond? I think, Trinaya, what do you like in terms of providing response? Would you rather do a focus group, Trinaya, or a survey? And a focus group is when you sit in a group with different youth of all ages and background, and you guys ask questions, and a researcher comes in and just take your overall responses.
Focus group.
Focus group. So maybe that's kind of where we start. We connect with the Youth Voices Committee to see what areas or what age groups would love surveys and which ones would love focus groups. Trinaya has really just jumped out of her shell. If I would have asked her that a year ago, she would have definitely said a survey. What do you think, Ivy? Do you think we should do focus groups and surveys, or just stick with one?
Well, I believe that we probably should just stick with one, although I believe that surveys are good for those people who are kind of like, not really willing to open up. But I believe that a focus group would be beneficial in so many ways, because you can kind of like hear the impact.
Okay. And also, we did a listening session, DBI did a listening session about a year ago. We had children from different schools come between the ages of 14 to 19. And they sat down and they talked about it. And so maybe we could do a listening session style focus group for them as well in different parts of the state. Focus groups provide good quality data. I agree, Dana.
I was just going to say the same thing with that. You can contextualize the lived experiences. You get a better feel.
Okay. So that's one of our charges for the Data Research Committee, is to do focus groups in different parts of the state with children between the ages of 14 to 25 who are currently incarcerated, who are parents or children of parents that are incarcerated, and also caregivers as well.
And Madam Chair, if you're partnering with Tulane, I'm sure they're going to do a section maybe in the introduction about who are these children, right?
Yes.
How many are in the state of Louisiana? How many are to Ms. Burgess and Dr. Peterson's observation, maybe struggling K through 12? How many are in the foster care system? It would be good to really be able to paint that picture as concretely as possible.
I know, I'm so excited. Okay, and so what I think we should do next is, once we give Dr. Nagatu our recommendations, she reach out to them and ask them to be on the committee. Dr. Nagatu, can you email all of the committee members to make sure that they meet at least one time before our next council meeting? So, for example, if we're in the the Data Research Committee, a person from our council should reach out to, or should set up the meeting for their specific committee that they're in. Once you get in your committees, you guys can decide on who is going to be the chair or the co-chair, and just send Dr. Nagatu a response on how or who was selected and voted on as the chair of the committee. We definitely want you guys to meet with the members one time before the next council meeting, and begin to start thinking about ways on how we can work to get the report completed. And you guys can also let everyone know that if they need to reach out to us for support, that they can, and we're here for them. So I think we kind of talked about what the scope and the work is for all of the goals. I think with the ideas that we came about with Dr. Peterson and Secretary Summers about reaching out to different schools and people that are currently incarcerated, I think that will help us recruit more members for each committees. And once we get the committees together, we can start assigning tasks on how we can work to get our report completed. Because I think we have until January to have it completed. So the roadmap that we did with SPLC, it is finally done. I am going to post a link in the comments for you guys to view it. All right, here it is. So you can share it with everybody in your groups and your organizations. We're super excited about it. And now we can open it up to public comments, unless anybody else has anything to add before we move to public comments.
Madam Chair, I just want to make one or two observations. And if you're amenable in terms of next steps regarding your observations about people giving feedback, because we're all so incredibly busy, maybe some deadlines would be helpful. Maybe, and I'm just going to toss out some things, Madam Chair, and you decide what works for you, and then the whole body can weigh in. But maybe in terms of the nominations for the three committees, Youth Voices, Caregivers, and Data, if you could have, as you've asked folk, those two nominations per committee into Dr. Nagatu by Friday of next week. So that way Dr. Nagatu can quickly on that Monday, solicit dates from the various committees to have that interim committee meeting before the May 6th council meeting. I also want to add, because I think we all heard it, we have one member of the Caregivers Committee, Ms. Harris. And so as you're thinking about your two nominees, I would just suggest if you have more for caregivers, maybe steer them to caregivers. I think that would be incredibly helpful. And then Dr. Nagatu can run from there. I heard, Madam Chair, that you're going to, in the first meeting, that the folk will select their own chair or co-chairs. I think that's great. I would offer up that those chair or co-chairs probably need to come from the council itself.
Yes.
Not someone, right, that we're recruiting to come into the mix. The other thing outside of this is, because I mentioned this in our last meeting, I'm working with the governor now to see if he will join our next conversation on May 6th. If the answer is we can get him in at 10 o'clock on the 6th, that'll be wonderful. The second question will be if we decide to put it on the public schedule, and I'm going to advocate for that. So I just want everyone to be clear, and we'll send this out, Dr. Nagatu will via email, that if the governor's coming, if it's on the public record, we'll have media, TV stations, print media from across the state. And so just as long as everyone's aware of that, right? I'm not saying change anything you do, you just need to be fully aware that we will have a statewide audience in that meeting. But Dr. Nagatu will share with you once we get the confirmations. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome. I agree with Dr. Wilson. I think that I am happy to see the governor, join us for our May 6th meeting. And I definitely think that we should have those nominations, if not already, by next Friday, so Dr. Nagatu can go ahead and get those moving, and that a member from our council should be the chair. Even if you want to go ahead and decide that you want to be the chair now, I'm fine with that as well. Do we want to vote on chairs for the Youth Voices Committee? Do we want to do that now?
I nominate Aishla Burgess.
Dr. Foster, I was like that. Okay. I'd like to nominate Bree Anderson for the chair of the Youth Voices Committee.
And so you can clearly have more than one, right?
Yes.
So I've heard 2 nominations. Thank you, Madam Chair. Yep.
Okay, so Aishla and Bree Anderson, do you guys accept your nominations?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Okay, so we have Ms. Burgess and Ms. Anderson as chairs for the Youth Voices Committee. Ms. Harris was the only caregiver. She's the only person to be on the Caregivers Committee. Ms. Harris, would you like to be the chair of that committee?
If no one else signs up for it, sure.
And data and research. I'd like to go ahead and be the chair of that committee. Mr. Pittman, you want to join alongside of me as chair?
I am happy to be co-chair.
All right, let's do this. Okay, it's 10:52, guys. We want to take any public comments. Do we have any, Dr. Nagatu?
I'll share one public comment and celebrate the Daughters of the Incarcerated and our chair and vice chair for the wonderful story that was in WDSU in New Orleans a couple of weeks ago. It was the public kind of announcement that the council exists, and it was just a beautiful, beautiful story highlighting these really, really talented young African-American women that are striving, right? And beating the odds, and then to hear like the thoughtful reflections about what's happening and some of the reforms that need to take place. It was just a really, really powerful and lovely story. And Madam Chair, I shared with you that we want to try to help you get that story out across the state in every market. It was just a really, really great story.
I mean, you know, the work that we do with Daughters Beyond Incarceration, it should be shared to children across the state. And that is actually our goal this year, is to expand to other parts of the state so that girls from all over Louisiana can have the same opportunities as the girls in New Orleans have. If there aren't any other comments, I think we are done. Meeting is adjourned.
I have a good one.
Bye-bye. Everyone have a happy Easter as well.